to see so many people joining today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you, ETM, uh, followed by our co-host Impact Hub. So just 1 second, please. Bear with me while I share my slides. Thank you. Can you see my screen, everyone?
Yes.
Let's begin. So, hi everyone again. I'm Sarthak from ETM. I'm the global student head of global student network, and um, so what is ETM? We are a global community for anyone interested in innovation related to energy and technology. And by global, we mean global and having a global presence, but also focusing on local needs. So ETM has 4 chapters: Tokyo, Vienna, Berlin, and Amsterdam. And by having this, by keeping a global presence, we are also able to dive into local uh, specific contents for local audience, like for Tokyo, Berlin, Vienna. So we believe that energy innovation needs a diverse fields of expertise and strong innovation ecosystems, and that's why what we do is connecting diff, uh, connecting professionals, energy experts, businesses, startups, students, researchers through our events, like events, seminars, and of course all our events have networking sessions. Of course, we used to have physical sessions pre-COVID, but of course, due to COVID, all our events have been moved online until further notice. And part of it is that through such events, we want to deliver insights, like today's events delivering insights on energy energy in emerging markets, and our insights are delivered through either our Medium channel or our YouTube channel. So here's an example of what we publish in our Medium channel. And this is an example of Voices of ETM, that was which is a insight delivered after our digital innovation X Energy. And similarly, we have a insights we deliver insights to our YouTube channel, where not only do we put all the recorded events, but we also have ETM talks where we have one-to-one conversations with energy professionals and try to dive into their journey and their expertise. So with this ETM having a global presence, we strongly believe in this power of community, and that's why our community, we have around of 1,500 followers in worldwide, and they are a mix of people, as you can see from the graph, that we have a company, our community involves companies, startups, students, academia, and others. So with our global presence, we also have a very global team, again in Tokyo, Vienna, Berlin, and Amsterdam. And the interesting theme about our global team is each of us represent a different culture. So we are very diverse. And this is a very new initiative we have with ETM, and it's called Global Student Network, and which aims to connect students to the with energy experts and professionals. And we believe this is this way to go forward to inspire young energy enthusiasts, and this will help, like in with us, by connecting them to professionals. This will help them develop their knowledge and expertise. And for professionals, this is a very interesting option to not only engage with young talents from our community, but also use it as a talent pool for their future recruitment. And lastly, we also have other events than Dine and Discuss. And one of our very interesting event coming up is going to be with an international partnership with Ignite the Spark, and energy community in Israel. And The event is going to be about bridging energy innovation between Japan and Israel on November 30th. So please make sure to follow us on our social media. We are available on, as you can see, most of the social media: Facebook, PTX, LinkedIn, YouTube, Medium, and make sure you stay connected with us for our future events and get connected to us. So without further, that's all with ETM. And now I would like to pass to our co-host today, Impact Hub. To Yuka-san.
Hi, thank you, Sarthak. So, hi, yeah. Hi, I'm Yuko. I'm a community builder at Impact Hub Tokyo. I've been working at Impact Hub since last September, and before working in Japan, I was actually in Europe, Finland, Paris, and Berlin. And I actually got to meet a person from a Energy Tech Meetup community in Vienna as well. So I'm really also glad to be partnering with this community as well. So I'm gonna explain a little bit about Impact Hub Tokyo. So we have been an official partner of Energy Tech Meetup community since the early 2019. And I would like to quickly introduce about what is Impact Hub Tokyo. Impact Hub Tokyo is located in the local area of Meguro district, not so far from the JR Meguro station. And we are more than a co-working space, but we have a community where diverse people like entrepreneurs, freelancers, engineers, web developers, many people with different backgrounds, they gather and connect and exchange knowledges and ideas. We organize various types of events, and which is organized by us or sometimes in collaboration with partners. And with Energy Tech Meetup, we share the value and the concept of this event because we, as Impact Hub Tokyo, also want to encourage open discussion and co-learning in various fields of innovation. So if you're interested in more in detail about us, please check our website, which I'm gonna send it to the chat right now. This is the English website, which we have recently updated. We also have a Japanese website as well. Or you can also check our social media as well, which I'm also gonna send to the chat. Most of the events and articles about us are updated through this Facebook page, so please check it out. And yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Yuko-san. It's always great to collaborate with Impact Hub, and we hope to keep this collaboration going. So,
thank you.
Without further ado, today I'm going to introduce our event, our Dine and Discuss event. Dine and Discuss today's event, which is energy innovation in emerging countries, and we are very lucky to have two very interesting guests, Annette and Sebastian. So without further ado, I would like to first introduce Annette, and 1 second, please. My screen is... Yes, so without further ado, I would like to introduce everyone to Annette. Annette is an Italian engineer and researcher, and she's the associate researcher at the energy group at Sony CSL Paris, who's specializing in microgrids. And I would like to pass on to her for, of course, for the rest of the events. Thank you very much for joining us, Annette. It's great to have you here.
Hello. So let me share my screen. Give me a moment. Can you? Oh, you see the wrong screen, right? Which one do you see?
The countdown screen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we don't want to see that one, Annette.
Yeah. Give me a moment. Well, I think it was the other one. Okay. Now you can see the right one, right?
Sorry, we can't see the screen. Can you share again, maybe? Or would you like to share?
Okay, just again. Gonna get there.
We can see this presentation now. And the wrong one again.
Yeah, the wrong one again.
Would you like me to share?
Okay, now it should work, right?
Yeah, it's...
just need to move that part here. Okay. Okay, so now let's get started. Sorry for that. Thanks for inviting me and to speak about why bottom-up electrification matters. And so I want to start off with Joassin. He's a friend that I met in about 10 years ago in Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso in Africa when I was doing a project there, and we became friends. And about a year later or so, he came to me and told me, I want to electrify the village of my parents, the school. And so we started talking. It's like, hey, maybe we can do something. We did a survey, we did a business model. We tried to think of how can we do that. But very quickly, we found that it was just too expensive for people like us who didn't have the money to invest like an NGO would be able to do. But Joassin didn't give up. And so he said, okay, maybe we can start with kind of customized systems like this for for agriculture, for making a water pump, so for university. And so we founded Sol Africa for that and made this kind of customized system. But still, it was really hard for Joassin. And for the first years, he had to keep his full-time job as an engineer on the side to make a living. But as for myself, this was really the reason, I think, why I quit my software job and went into energy, which brought me to Japan, and many things happened afterwards. And so I worked on distributed and bottom-up energy systems since then. And why do I believe in distributed systems? So I think one is obviously climate change. We need more renewable sources, and the most promising renewable sources are wind and solar. And they are distributed by nature. So we need systems that can support it. And the second one is energy access. There's still a big amount of the population that doesn't have access to energy, and they usually live in rural areas distributed in hard to reach places. And it seems like the only way to access them is with distributed systems as well. And actually, to give you some numbers, today there is still 789 million people living without electricity. And it's even like more, like I heard 2 or 3 billion people who have like limited access to electricity. Now, this is great when you look at the improvement since 2010, like 500 million people have gained electricity. And we are planning with the SDG 7 goal to reach universal access, so 0% of people without electricity by 2030. However, it seems like, according to the current estimations, including like taking into account population growth and so on, if we continue the way we have been electrifying people till now, there will still be 674 million people without electricity in 2030. And the reason is that until now, most of the people who gain access gain through, for example, grid extension. They were living in urban areas, and so it was rather easy to electrify them. But the ones that are remaining in rural areas are really hard to reach, and you need distributed technologies. Now, fortunately, there is some things that have changed since I started talking to Joassin in the last 10 years, which is the decrease of price of solar panels and batteries that have become like 7 times cheaper by now. But probably even more importantly, what changed is that now there's technologies that allow to reduce the barrier of entry to solar systems, for example, solar battery systems, by allowing people to pay little by little over time with remote monitoring and mobile payment solutions. And these kind of systems have, the most popular system that has come up since then is the solar home systems, which are these small solar panels and batteries that can help you to power a light or charge a phone or a small fan or a radio, and that have already electrified like millions of people in many areas in Africa and Southeast Asia. But personally, I think that now we're moving towards something more like microgrids, because it brings together the accessibility and affordability of solar home systems or solar lanterns, but also the efficiency of the traditional grid, that you can distribute power in a more economic way. And indeed, even the World Economic Forum has stated that mini-grids and microgrids will enable developing countries to future-proof power networks that are not just this kind of intermediate solution that sometimes solar home systems are considered up, but actually future-proof ones, which allow people to move up the energy ladder. Now, why are microgrids in emerging markets often so different than what we hear about in developed countries? Well, obviously, the obvious reason is that they're not connected to the grid, which means you have to redistribute the power in a way that you have actually the biggest amount of available power to the population. If there is, you have to take into account that it might happen if people consume too much, or if the weather is too bad, that you might get a blackout, and it has to be part of the design. And also there is no access to the wholesale market. So there's no real price signal on what price should you sell the electricity. You really have to come up with it yourself. And it makes it very different from the systems that we've seen in developed countries. And at Sony CSL, the last 1 year, despite the COVID, that's what we've been trying to do, to find a bit more a data-driven approach, a holistic approach, to look at how these systems are evolving. And one of the things we looked at is the different topologies of microgrids. So we did have the solar home systems, which were the first types of system, and now these microgrids. And there's two types, centralized and distributed. Centralized, as the name says, have somewhere in the village a solar panel or a battery and pull the wires to each house. While the distributed ones have solar panels and batteries spread out in the houses and connect to each other so that people can share electricity, which allows kind of to more gradually scale the microgrid depending on how much load you have in the village. So here are some images to give you a bit more of an idea what it looks like. This is a centralized microgrid in India, made by Smart Power India. They've built about hundreds of them. And this is a microgrid in Cambodia made by Okra Solar. It's a distributed solar, so you see the solar panels in each roof and the wires that are connected to it. Then there is Solskjaer in Bangladesh, which Sebastian will talk about you much more in depth later, so I'll leave it up to him. But when looking at all these microgrids, I think what stood out to me is that the business models are so different and so diverse, much more diverse than what we could possibly have in developed countries. And I tried to find what are the different types, and there's 4 categories that stood out. One is obviously energy as a product, like for solar home system, where you pay by the day until you pay off the system and you own it and you get the electricity for free. But then there's also energy leasing, where you also pay by the day, independently what you consume. But at the end, but you never really own a system, which has advantages, for example, that you get upgrades or maintenance. And from a company perspective, they hold on to the customer, but it's much more difficult to put in place, logistically speaking. And then you have the models that require a bit more technology, like smart meters. And there you have energy as a commodity, which is more similar to what we use in what most of you guys use, which means you pay per the kilowatt hour or the kilowatt or some kind of unit proportional to the amount of energy you use. And even one step further is energy trading or peer-to-peer grids, which received a lot of attention everywhere around the world, because they allow not just to buy electricity, but also to sell it. So in the case when you have really abundant renewables, this will become really interesting. And especially the last 2 ones, there's a lot of innovation, a lot of technologies that have come up in the last few years. Now, many times I get asked, so what do you think is going to be the winner of these models? And there is no real answer to that. I have to disappoint you on that. It's really a complex system that is really evolving, but even more importantly, what we've seen is that in every country, in every environment, the regulations are different. In some countries, some things are allowed, in others they're not. In some countries, people already have solar home systems. In others, they don't have it yet. In some, they really want to own the system. In some others, they're like, just using the electricity is enough. I don't need to own the entire system. So it really depends on the customer and on the regulations. And I don't think there will be one winner. It will be like a combination of models. But to come back to give you an update on Seoul Africa and Joassam, my friend. So eventually he did quit his job, and he went into full-time doing Seoul Africa. He hired 6 full-time employees and bought vehicles like this crane that is the latest acquisition. By now has managed to install an impressive 300 kilowatt peak, more than that, of distributed solar, which generates about 500 gigawatt hours a year in Burkina Faso. Now, the reason why I wanted to talk to you about him is because these are the kind of entrepreneurs you rarely hear about. They don't get any international funding. They don't get any financing, and especially any advertisement or publicity from the rest of the world. But I think they're really the ones that drive this renewable transition, or in this case, electrification. And so they're the drivers for it. And I think together with the enablers that bring these new technologies, will really, when they meet, will really have an acceleration of sustainable energy access. And that's what I'm hoping for. So that's it from me. I think I'm over my 10 minutes anyway. So I'll pass over to Sebastian, or to Sartak, to introduce Sebastian.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It was very interesting to hear the vision of such interesting startups. And now I would like to introduce our second speaker, Sebastian. Sebastian is the CEO of ME SoulShare, and SoulShare is a pioneer in interconnecting solar home systems in peer-to-peer networks. And so now I would like to, without further ado, I would like to pass it on to Sebastian for thank you very much, Sebastian, for joining us. It's great to have you today.
Thank you, Sartak. Thank you very much. I was actually originally thinking to play a quick video for you to get a little bit of a ground reality, but I think I'll skip that, and you can watch the video at your own time if you're still interested after hearing me speak here. So I'll post the link a little later in the chat window. I like to pick it up basically directly from what Annette presented, and thanks, Annette. I think you opened a big canvas here and gave a nice intro, and it's always nice if you confirm things as the second speakers, but also challenge a few things. So I'll try to do that. I titled my presentation "Reverse Innovation," and then I put a question mark, because I don't have any scientific proof for what I'm going to claim here. And since this is a casual round and not a scientific or whatnot event, I hope you forgive me for that. And I hope you also challenge me for what I'm going to say. And the bottom is "The future of energy begins with Bangladesh." There I didn't put a question mark because it is just a bold statement of mine, which I don't want anyone to question. No, just kidding. So let's move it ahead. We have, oh, sorry, I'm struggling with the tech here. Okay, now there we go. We have 3 world records in Bangladesh, and those are facts based on data. One is Bangladesh has the highest population density except for the city-states. It's just a fact per se. It also has the world's largest solar home system installation base, with by now more than 6 million individual solar home system. And you see in my background here, you see an extreme example of a bazaar, which is kind of a marketplace where you see a huge density. Behind me there are about 50 odd numbers of solar home systems in an area which is just like 100-meter radius. So the country has installed more than solar home systems than the rest of the world, all of the countries accumulated, which is quite something, and there must be certain reasons for that. It also has the biggest mobile money market in the world, even bigger than what we know from the M-Pesas and so forth. which has even more accelerated now during COVID, because the government has decided to distribute its aid, its support during COVID also via mobile money, so that literally every person in the country has either direct or indirect access to that mobile money, to a mobile money agent, or by themselves. So these are three individual world records. And then we have Maya here, which I subtitled here as the world's first ever prosumer. This picture was taken by me in 2015 when she just had paid out or cashed out money from her meter. You see the meter here a little bit covered. This is our Sol box, a smart meter. So her solar system had sold electricity because her battery was full automatically, and that money then was credited to her mobile money account, and that she then could cash out. So that she was connected with her neighbors is what we call a peer-to-peer network. And we refer to her as the world's first ever prosumer to have done that in such a solar peer-to-peer trading network. And this is just a little quote from her and she's been really proud, because for her, she earned money through her solar home system. So she basically said that she feels like a smart businesswoman now. Obviously, she didn't use that kind of wording, but that's more or less the literal translation of that. So the question is, how is that possible? How do we have in one country literally the biggest distributed solar energy utility in the world, which is Bangladesh, or you have the biggest mobile money, which is like really advanced, I would say, digital finance technology, or you have the first prosumer. How is it possible? And this is where I'm stretching it a little bit. So I'm bringing you two concepts here into the room or onto the field. One is strategic niche management, and one is reverse innovation. And I'm happy to discuss them further, but just to give brief ideas why I bring those concepts up. So first is strategic niche management as a framework where certain technologies come up in a very specific context. And it's not so much about how strong, how good, or how innovative the technology itself is, but it's more like in the context they are, what are the current social practices, and what are the existing choices that are in place that it replaces. So for a solar home system, usually we say, okay, the social practice is that people need light. So the choice which is existing is, let's say, a kerosene lamp, and a kerosene lamp costs you a certain amount of money per month. And then somebody came with an innovative model and said, okay, if I can sell this person a better solution, which would be a solar light, let's say, which costs that person per month the same amount what she paid before for the kerosene lamp, then she's better off. And that's how an uptake can happen. And that's how solar home systems across the world, I think, were introduced with this kind of business model innovation. In our case, you would argue, and like when I say our case, I mean in Bangladesh as SolShare, you would argue we came into the field and saw people throwing cables to their neighbors because their neighbors didn't have electricity, but they had solar home systems. The neighbors, for some reason, for them, this business innovation didn't do the trick. They still couldn't afford it. So they started sharing. So that's what we call an extreme user behavior. And that became then a social practice. So all that SolShare did is to leverage or to borrow this idea, which came from the field, and systemize it and put it onto a platform, which is then called the Sol Bazaar, which is our peer-to-peer trading platform. Now, if such a strategic niche picks up and creates what we refer to as a breakthrough innovation, then that can lead to a larger uptake, and it can lead to a trickle-up effect, opposite to what we usually refer to as a trickle-down effect. And I would like to flip this a little bit, because often when we look at C.K. Prahalat's Base of the Pyramid, the famous book, it almost solely considers the base of the pyramid as potential consumers for certain services. That people, though the revolution then was, let's not look at them as beneficiaries, but let's look at them as customers, because customers I treat better than beneficiaries. That was the assumption behind it. And I think where we're going now is, now let's go one step further, and let's not look at them only as consumers and customers, but let's also look at them as creators and suppliers of ideas and innovations. I think, and that's where I would like to make the link to Joachim, for instance, which Annette introduced. He's a typical creator of such a solution. And to spin it even one further, when the World Economic Forum says, is this solution future-proof, which means, is it not only an intermittent solution for an acute problem, and then it will basically be overhauled by another technology, but is it future-proof? Can we even say that now these solar home systems that, let's say 10 years from now, they are not only future-proof, that they are the norm for Japan or for Germany. I forgot where you all have your hubs. You had Vienna, Austria, Berlin, Tokyo, right? So will this become the norm, that we may not call them solar home system, but rooftop solar with storage, which is a solar home system at the end of the day, that this becomes the norm, and the pathetic excuse as a backup will be a national grid. So a vice versa. So the question is, are these solutions future-proof, or are these solutions rather the future? And we just cut out the word proof. So that's what I wanted to bring in a little bit, because if that is true, then I start with this in a niche which has very specific, let's say, circumstances that it can grow there. It can be regulatory, it can be cost, it can be just that you have a green field that you have in these areas, not a grid. So you don't have these legacy systems. So you can actually break through with that innovation. It leads to a larger uptake, and then it can have a trickle up effect. And we really have a reverse innovation, which means something is innovated in the BOP market and is then being picked up by what we call the developed world. So where things would be the reverse. I just wanted to fuel that in. And in our case, as I already mentioned, the whole notion came from that these 6 million solar home systems at 3 p.m., their batteries were full. So we said, what's happening for the next couple of hours? The sun is still shining. And it turned out that all that energy got completely unused, completely wasted. We calculated up over the whole 6 million systems, and it is about $1 billion every year, which got wasted. So what Solskjaer did or tried to do is to see what we saw in the field, which is, throwing the cables, which is nothing else than a sharing economy model, and try to tap into this $1 billion and make that money available to those communities. And I said I don't have proof, and I don't, but still I would argue that we came up with that model in 2015, but I know there are a lot of people here in the room who did very similar models in Okinawa, so I don't want to claim anything which is not due here, but yet the WEF made that model from Bangladesh, a tech pioneership thing in 2018, which I think is quite a success for a model which sprung up here in Bangladesh in very remote areas, sprung up with this young lady you saw in the beginning, Maya. And it may be a first indication that reverse innovation is indeed possible. And we will see a lot more of that than only this example. So I also keep it as brief as Annette did. So thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to the discussion now. I will post the video link in case you're interested to get a little bit of an insight into the grids. Over to you, Satak.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. Thank you very much for an amazing insight. And Solskjaer is definitely a great inspiration to the world. If you don't mind, Sebastian, can I share the video quickly? I actually have it on my laptop right now.
Oh, yeah, I mean, It's
Sure.
I think it's only 2 minutes. So as the
Yeah.
people prefer. Yeah.
All right, I will just share it quickly. 1 second, please. Right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah. No, but we don't have to have the audio. Let's go to the discussion, and I'll share it, and everybody can watch it in their own time, and we can rather take the opportunity and discuss here. What do you think, Sarthak?
All right, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, great. So thank you very much again. And so now we will be moving on to the panel discussion. And as Amanda has already explained in the chat, and if anyone has a question, please write them on the chat, or feel free to unmute your mic to ask the question. To get the ball rolling, I'd like to ask first question. My first question is to both the speakers, but I guess Sebastian, please go ahead and answering it first, and then can answer it. So what is the current state of energy in emerging countries, and how do you think it's different from the rest of the world?
That's a big question, and I'm sure we have people here in the room who can answer it better than me. I mean, I can speak a little bit on Bangladesh because this is where I do the most of my research. This is where I live and get the best idea. So Bangladesh has been run by gas predominantly. That's because there was a lot of local gas which was explored. It is now running out and looking for alternatives. And given of the density, the utility scale solar PV plants have had a rather bumpy road in the last couple of years, and not a lot of success was found. And also not a lot of wind was identified. So unfortunately, the current energy planning predicts or foresees or even plans to switch a lot of those gas dependency over to LNG and also coal. So that would be, I guess, from a climate perspective, is a very tricky path ahead, and a very it also creates quite dependencies, and a lot of people here are doing their best to try to show other opportunities and alternatives before we get locked in those. On the energy access side, which is really the field which we were talking about to date, Bangladesh has made tremendous progress in the past years. So there was this world record of solar home system. 10% of the population have solar home systems and uses them as a primary source of energy. This is now being taken over by the national grid with high density. Obviously, also the feasibility for grid extension is better than in probably some of the many of the sub-Saharan African countries or other countries like the Pacifics or the Philippines, Indonesia, where you have a lot of islands where this topographical nature requires different approaches. Yet also here, there remains a fraction of the population which is off-grid. And there is a debate how big that population is. According to the government, that gap is closing or is being closed latest by next year when the country celebrates its 50th anniversary. And Solskjaer is kind of maneuvering between those worlds and saying, okay, look, how can we bridge the gap? How can we make those 6 million solar home systems still usable, even if the grid was to come? Do we just want to throw those away? These are accumulated also about 300 megawatts in terms of PV generation and equivalent in terms of storage, which I think has become a very big topic here in Bangladesh by now as well. So that's a very interesting, and we also have a lot of islands on the big rivers in this delta where the grid has not reached and might not reach, will not reach. This is, one has to be very careful nowadays. So a very strong track record towards 100% electrification, very similar to India, really, which obviously did this over an even much larger population. But also a dire outlook right now in terms of the energy mix. And I think there it is on a lot of us to try to steer and change and influence that, to avoid a lock-in into only fossil fuels, and to show the feasibility and practicality and the advantages of, let's say, greener horizons.
All right, thank you very much, Sebastian. And I'd like to, we would all like to hear your views on this, the difference between energy in emerging countries versus the rest of the world.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more with what Sebastian was saying. So it is true that, for example, in developed countries, I mean, there's a lot of effort that has gone into more renewables, and I guess it really depends on the country, and maybe Europe is a little bit more in advance compared to other countries. But I do think indeed maybe one of the biggest differences is that, or in some sense achievement, is that I think in Europe so many are now pushing towards stopping to fund coal or fossil fuels, and that has not happened, of course, yet in emerging countries. And I think that's one of the biggest difference. Of course, there's a lot of innovation in both areas. Many people are trying to push renewables, but indeed, I think one of the first thing we have to do is to stop funding coal, for example, and that often, unfortunately, still comes from developed countries as well, and stopping in their own countries, but continuing in other countries like in Bangladesh. And yeah, I hope that both things will progress faster. On one side, the renewable track increasing faster, as well as stopping funding coal or other approaches in order to not be locked into these technologies.
All right, thank you very much for your views. Yeah. So I'd like to pass it on to the audience. So the next question is from Utah. Utah, would you like to unmute your mic and ask it, or?
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for the presentations. It was very insightful. I'm not actually really familiar with the energy industry, but I was just curious about this distributed system. And like, for instance, like with a centralized system, when you have a natural disaster, so it's up to the electronics provider to get the grid up and running again. But for this distributed system, I think the big question is, like, if the grid goes down due to a natural disaster or some unfortunate event, like whose responsibility is it to get the grid up again? And I wanted to ask both presenters, or and Sebastian and Annette. Thank you.
Annette, should I start on that one?
Go ahead.
Yuja, thanks for the question. I mean, I think it was like 2 months ago, there was a natural disaster here in Bangladesh, which was the super typhoon Amphan, which hit the Bay of Bengal. And after the hit, the south of the country was out. The entire grid, national grid, broke down. They by now learned, they're very resilient and very good by now. They learned to bring it up very quickly again. It takes maybe a day only, or not much. But our grids in the south, they didn't go out at all. And why is that? Because if you have a centralized infrastructure and a natural disaster strikes, and then something breaks, and since it's centralized, everything breaks down. Now, the beauty of this peer-to-peer network is that it is decentralized literally, which means if you look behind me, if a couple of those panels fly away, or also cables fly away, the way it works is you have one house being connected to another 3 and yet another 3. So you have very quickly a very complex mesh network. And you can trade or get electricity also not only from your direct neighbor, but also through another house. So even if 2 cables fly away, you can still be fully accessible through the 3rd cable. And also if the water comes into your house and it goes up and up and up, what the people do is they put the stones under the bed, right? And the battery, which is usually under the bed, now stays on top of the bed, and that's it. And the life goes on, the electricity remains. So people have grown extremely accustomed, extremely adapted to those kind of disasters. And I think the approach we chose with this peer-to-peer is very much in sync with it. We also refer to it, borrowed from Micro Energy International, a company in Berlin, as swarm electrification, like a swarm of fish or a school of fish. If that is attacked, that swarm, a few fish are eaten, but the rest just continues to swarm on and move on, seemingly unharmed. The same in our case. So actually our grid didn't go out during the disaster, and we have disasters every couple of months. So it's quite disaster proof by now. But let's say it does go out, because that was your real question, I suppose. So first of all, the big difference here is, and Annette had this in her slides, is the grid or the systems, the individual systems are owned by the people themselves. So it is their ownership. That's why they take the battery from their bed and put it on top, because it's theirs and they take care of it. If it was a national utility and it was the utility's battery, the battery would probably drown in the water. This was the last thing they would think about. Ownership is a very strong factor to take care of something. And shared ownership is not. That's at least what I learned in the last couple of years. So it's individual ownership. And if my system produces more, I can sell more and I have more money. End of the story. Now we have what we call an area manager in every village to be our eyes and ears, and we're doing a B2B approach. So these people or organizations who installed those 6 million solar home systems, we work with them together to take care of the grid. But still, a lot of the taking care is just by design, because the people take care of it because it's their own.
All right, thank you. Annette, would you like to share your views?
Yeah, no, I think, again, Sebastian was doing a really good job. Yeah, I think, as I said, all the decentralized or distributed solutions by nature are just more resilient to blackouts in the first case. Blackouts are, you don't have things like rolling blackouts, pardon, that you know, spread over different areas. But on the other hand, you actually avoid it, and you keep, if there is a fault, it's usually local and remains local and can be fixed rather soon. So yeah, that's it.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, so for our next question, we have a question from actually I have a question, sorry. How can microgrids economically support energy access? In other words, how can we monetize microgrids in emerging countries? Annette, would you like to start?
Yeah, so this is a really good question. I think it's still open, and I mean, if still to be figured out, I think. I tried to look into it and the different business model and how you can actually get people to pay for it, whether it is to getting the electricity or being able to also sell it. And a bit like Soulshare is doing is that you allow people to sell it and then you get some trading fees. So there's different models on how to monetize microgrids. And depending on how you make your customer pay for it or pay for the electricity or the service that you're offering, which could also be a service like for appliances, like productive use appliances, which could be a fridge to store your fish, or it could be a grinder for rice or corn. And so basically not necessarily only the microgrid and the electricity itself, but you could also have this kind of side businesses that actually make the energy more valuable in itself. For example, when you provide a usage for the energy. So I think that is a very important part if you want to monetize a microgrid, knowing what the electricity will be used for and basically provide help to getting these appliances that are required for it. Yeah, I think that on the other hand, I think there is still the need in many cases to also have some public help. We are still providing an infrastructure, electrification infrastructure, which is usually a government's role. And so some countries are complementing and helping to start with the initial investment that the microgrid needs to get up and running. I mean, you have to imagine that if you do grid access, if you extend the grid, it costs like $2,000 per connection, which is really expensive, and it's usually covered by the utilities at a loss as well. And so but that initial cost is usually covered by some governmental organizations. And so I think to start off, it does really help to get this kind of initial help to get things started, to be also competitive with the other approaches that are being funded by governments.
Well, thank
Sebastian,
you very
do
much.
you add?
Yeah, sorry, Sebastian, would you like to go ahead?
No, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
All right. So I'd like to encourage anyone from audience to ask a question. Feel free to unmute your mic, or please put it on the chat if you have any question. If not, I think Amanda from ETM has a question. Amanda, would you like to go ahead?
I think Zayed actually has a question. Would you
Oh,
like
okay.
to?
Sorry, yeah. Zayed, would you like to go ahead?
Oh, okay. So I have a question to Dr. Sebastian about like in the rural villages, we usually have like solar home system in houses, and the houses stay in clusters, and we have those systems because there is no utility grid. So my question was, can we like connect this microgrids with other microgrids, and so we have an interconnected microgrids, and is there any challenges in that?
I think we can. The question is, are we doing it in the traditional sense, the way we would all probably think about it right now, that we put a cable between those clusters? Or can it be maybe a EV which is driving between the two clusters and is a moving storage? Because the EVs here, Said, you probably know that there are a lot of electric rickshaws by now in Bangladesh, anywhere between 1.5 and 2 million. And this number will keep increasing. So in the future, maybe they could be the interconnection, and that you could have a smart system where you know the trading pattern or the usage pattern, usage production and trading pattern, let's say, of the cluster A and the cluster B. You also know the usual routes of those EVs, because they always do the same, right? It's not like that they go one day north and the second day they go south. They always do the same kind of routes. So if you know all these informations, maybe you can structure a way where you can have an incentive system for that EV driver, that he or she becomes a moving storage, and you have vehicle to grid and grid to vehicle charging in both directions. That could be a very interesting thing. If it was a cable, I would argue, yes, absolutely, it is possible. The question then is like, how long is the distance? At what voltage do we do the interconnection? If we talk DC, like how big will the voltage drop be? And thirdly, every meter of DC cable here costs us about, let's say, 40 cents. So who's paying for that cable between the two clusters? Because I was stressing the fact that the system kind of belongs to the people who pays for the cables. Are we putting this on an overhead basis, or is the government saying, oh, that would be really cool if those clusters were interconnected, because it would be more stable, and we pay, half a kilometer of cables between those two. So there's a lot of question marks, which I think is probably the answer to your challenges. But there's also a lot of opportunities if we think a little bit outside the box and say, do we actually need a cable between those two? And what is the advantage of interconnecting the two? I had a conversation last night with Annette, and maybe you want to elaborate on that. Is like, how much do we gain from one marginal additional user in our grids, in terms of diversification impact, but also in terms of trade volume. Trade volume means how many kilowatt hours are being traded. I mean, for us, obviously, the higher the trade volume, the more monetization was the topic before, the more money we make. So if we interconnect two clusters, does that increase the trade volume? I don't know. If yes, then it's good for us, but does it justify the 100 meters of cable? These are very complicated, complex simulations we will have to learn along the way. Maybe Annette, you want to say a little bit about the impact on the diversification?
So yeah, I think it's a super interesting question and challenge that we've been looking into for quite some time now. And I think there's also many researchers who study that now. Because conceptually it is an interesting proposition. Now in practice, indeed, the thing is, when you connect systems bottom up, things work like the other way around than when you do top down. I mean, currently we have like transmission and then distribution and then the final customers, and like the higher you go, the more you have actually energy that is being sent to. But when you connect system bottom up, which can themselves generate power and store power, then actually on a higher levels, you need probably less. And so it might not be necessarily economically interesting to connect things, especially if the diversity, which is what Sebastian mentioned earlier. So diversity really matters. If you have a reason, for example, one village that consumes the energy during daytime, and the other village or the other is kind of a factory that consumes during daytime and the village during nighttime, and you have actually a reason or a difference between the types of consumptions or generation in the two villages, then it would make sense to interconnect, because you actually increase the overall availability or the usage that you can do with the power that is there. But if they're very similar, then most likely you would just share with the neighbor next door rather than the village next door. It's just there's less losses. So it really, it's a very interesting topic.
But won't it increase the resilience of the systems?
True, that's a good point. Resilience, of course, is always improved if you connect the bigger systems. And indeed, that could be a point. Whether it's economically justifying it or not is another question.
Oh, that's very interesting. Thank you very much for asking the. Thank you very much, Zaid, for asking the question too. So we have another question from Alex, and this will be our last question. And then, of course, I know a lot of many people have more questions, so please feel free to ask other questions in the networking session we will have. So, Alex, would you like to ask your question? It's okay.
I can also pick it up like this. I mean, I read it already. It's basically about end of life and what happened to the waste. And see, so 6 million solar home systems are 6 million batteries. And these batteries are lead acid batteries. So this is no joke, 6 million batteries if they were dumped somewhere in the rural areas. Now, the lead has so much value that there is not a single battery which has ever been dropped. Maybe that's going a little far, but I haven't seen any battery being dumped anywhere. The batteries are all being recycled because the value of the lead. Now, how they are being recycled is a different story. Whether this is in a formal recycling with proper safety procedures, or whether this is somewhere in old Dhaka in a small flat where kids take the battery apart by hand and inhale all the fumes and so forth. So that is a different story. And I think the latter story, a business model cannot solve. That is something where regulation needs to kick in. On the panels, now the panels come with 20-year plus warranty. So similarly, there is a discussion going on, what will we do with all the panels? The problem here is a little bit, there is no solution because it's not economically feasible yet to develop a solution because there are not enough panels there yet to recycle. So there's no recycling mechanism for the PV panels like there is for the lead acid batteries, but that's simply because of the amount of recycling panels is not sufficient yet. From a business model, the way it was always designed is that if I want to sell you a new battery, what I would do is I would give you a discount for this new battery if you give me your old one. So that's how they did it. And the same you could do with the PV panel. Now for the battery, that was logical why the companies here did it, because it was pure money, because they would get the lead and sell that. For the PV panel, it's a little bit different. Yet we don't see panels being littered because, see, even if the panel only works a little bit, it will still stay on the roof and will bring a little bit of electricity. I don't throw that away. It will just stay there. And even if it has lots of splitters, it'll still stay on the roof. So we don't see the problem yet, but we might see. So I think it's a fair question. It's a very good question to ask, but it's not acute yet. From a business model point of view, I would just stress the way we try to design it, at least, is that it's a platform, which means I have a continuous relationship with my customer, which obviously also allows me to monitor all these things and gives the incentives to be able to provide new products and take the old ones in return.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, before we move on to networking, Annette and Sebastian, would you like to say some points before we move on to networking?
Thanks for joining in and listening, and I hope you enjoyed the talk.
All right.
And maybe do something yourself in energy.
All right, thank you very much. So, so the networking session. So now we'll move to this networking session. And networking session. Please feel free to ask any questions you have in the during the networking session. But also, since it's a networking session, feel free to share your own ideas you have. Maybe ask some questions regarding your ideas. Just feel free to interact regarding anything. So, yeah. So please, to the audience, feel free to share your ideas, any particular thoughts you have regarding whatever was discussed today.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
So yeah, does anyone want to share any ideas or introduce yourself? Or this is a time, I think, when we can find useful contacts and, you know, get help with projects, etc.
My name is Tadashi Morita speaking. I'm a member of the IEC. Then I'm discussing about the power size. I mean, because the World Bank several years ago published a document saying that the multi-tier framework that's you know, separating the 5 level. Then probably Bangladesh is a tier 2 or 3, which means that they are 300 watts or such around those power size. But for growing the economy, they need much more power consumption. So then we need to think about you know, migration between the tier 1 to tier 5. Is there any idea you have? Probably Sebastian.
Just for me to make sure that I understand it, but the tier framework, are you referring to the multi-tier framework for energy access or a different IEC tier framework? Because then I don't know it, and then I have to be very careful.
Yeah, I'm talking about the multi-tier framework, 5 tiers. So then tier 1 is probably 30 watts and the tier 2 is probably 300 watts and those. Then go up to the 2 kilowatts or so.
Mm-hmm. No, okay, then it's related at least. It's probably for the sake of this question answer, I think it's fine to assume that it's more or less the same. So here's the thing. I'm not arguing that what we do is the solution for the whole country, right? I'm just saying if I look at a country and say, all right, I have here 100 million people, 30 million people have no access to any form of electricity and 70 million people have. Then the question is, in today's age, do I still need to say, no, everybody needs to have this national grid access? Or can I predict something where I say, this is a little bit like putting a landline to someone who already has a mobile phone? That doesn't make sense. But now I agree with you that the comparison is not quite fair, because the mobile phone is more powerful than the landline, whereas the DC grid we have would probably not justify your tier 4 or tier 5 requirement. So usually what is the demand of the hour is an integrative electrification planning. Integrative meaning we would like to join the different options we have. And the call from the, let's say, the Energy for All sector is just to say, okay, a solar home system, a mini grid is one option of the pool for electrification. Now, when I did my PhD in Bangladesh, the result was actually that most of the solar home system were performing on average significantly better than the national grid based on the tier framework, but now not the IEC tier framework, but the tier framework as defined over by the ASMAP, by the World Bank. Why was that? Because one of the questions in the tier framework was, how many hours of electricity do you have between 6 and 10 p.m.? The solar home system owners, most of them answered 4 hours, all 4. The people who had the national grid often answered 1 or 2 hours because of too many blackouts and brownouts, so that they were actually performing lower. Now you could argue, well, over time the grid becomes better and so forth. So yes, I think it should be an integrative approach, but I also believe that what I see among all our customers, anything they want to power, they can power if you just give them the ability to have up to 1 kilowatt. There is no appliance they need or they want to power right now. I mean, I saw in the chat a little bit about washing machines and this kind of stuff. There is no washing machine in rural Bangladesh, and I don't see that happening very soon. There's no desire, demand for that. If it changes, okay, it's a different story. But what we see right now, let's say 90+% of all the express needs we see, we can cover with the kind of grid coverage with a DC power up to 1 kilowatt. You can put an inverter and can run an AC appliance. That's all fine. You're done. There are also no ACs, luckily not. So we're talking fans, not ACs. We're talking fridges and not like big freezer boxes. So, and all that runs and all that works. So the question is, from an economic point of view, do I really need the grid to go there? Or can I supply them with all they need? And whether this is then ends up a tier 3, tier 4 kind of thing, maybe that's the requirement of the hour. And we come back to future proof. Maybe if you strengthen that, combine them, it becomes future proof. And even if you go one step forward, it becomes the future. So I'm a little bit torn there.
Thank you very much. Understand.
All right. I think Stefan wanted to ask something. Stefan, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the inspiring talk. I'm involved in very many European projects and national projects, and my biggest hurdle is when experimenting the legislative or the regulation side. I mean, if these microgrids are set up private, there is probably not a big deal, but if you connect it to the to the existing grid, how is it then? Or is it not such a big deal of because it's not possible talking money-wise or whatever?
We get that one. Yeah, no, regulation is a problem everywhere, not just in Europe, I think. But it is true that when you're off-grid, very often you have less regulations. But even that depends on the country. And you can actually see a lot of differences in, you know, the countries where microgrids are actually being implemented and where not. Usually depends on regulation. But it's regulation, not necessarily technical things, but simply in some countries you're not allowed to sell electricity if you don't have a retail license, or there's many regulations that need to change, that have changed. There is a lot of progress, but yeah, it's still in some sense limited. I think in many countries there, when you're off grid or in DC, when you're not connected to the grid, as you said, the regulations are much less, at least technical, and you can try out things. When you're below a certain capacity, a certain power, I think that's the case for Bangladesh, but maybe Sebastian will know better. When you do connect to the grid, things change, of course. You need to respect safety measures as well as regulations. And it's a whole different field. Usually these are two completely different things, and it gets more complicated for that. It's a work in progress. In many ways, in that sense, it is actually easier to make progress in off-grid areas because of the regulatory and easiness that you can, or the things that you can do, which you cannot do otherwise. So you can try many technical pilots, or also do microgrids like Solskjaer's microgrids, which you can do off grid, but you probably couldn't do on grid simply because of regulation. So it's easier. You can test out many things. It's these technical things. You still might need licenses, but. Yeah, right. I'm not sure that's the answer to your question.
Maybe just, Stefan, I would love to talk a little bit more about you. We just got a regulatory sandbox last week, and I saw you mentioned in the chat also about sandboxes. So we just got one to be allowed to pool solar home systems, like let's say everything which is behind me, pool it and feed it into the grid out through one node. So we will start that now. We got a sandbox for 6 months where we are allowed to do that. We will not be paid by the grid yet. So it's basically for the government to monitor what we are doing, to test that it is all safe and it doesn't interfere with their reliability. I mean, these are the two main concerns, right? Safety and non-interruption reliability. So we can prove that we don't compromise those two, they said, then it's fine. And then the numbers will talk, meaning how much money will we get? Because that is a big question then, because I feed in electricity from such a tiny panel from a poor person, which is 100% renewable and covered with storage. So I can even say I feed in at 7 p.m. when your grid has low voltage. What do you pay me for it? Do you pay me the 5 cents, which you pay usually when I have under the net metering tariff? Or do you pay me 10 cents, 20 cents, 30 cents? What is a fair tariff? So that's going to be a very interesting next 6 months. And then if everything goes well, also negotiations. So if you have some insights on it, I would be happy to connect and discuss a little bit further, because for us, this is a new field. We just got the sandbox, and it'll be an interesting experience.
Yeah, pricing will be a big thing. Like that's the thing, when you're off grid, you can set the prices often the way you want to, and it's very hard to compete. So competition is a big thing.
Thanks, that's great to know. But are you offering like the information of your production capabilities or battery state of charge to the operator, so he knows what he can expect, or is that not yet topic of the talk and just like a black box system that they receive?
I think For us, less so. For them, it's a pretty much of a black box so far. We're trying to get them more involved in the process. Requested them now to have one dedicated person who really accompanies the regulatory sandbox. I mean, the word or the expression regulatory sandbox per se was a new term in the whole discussion. So they call it now, I think they call it a feasibility project, which doesn't need to apply the rules, which I guess is a nice way around of regulatory sandbox. So we are in a very, very early stages, Stefan. So it's, and also we have to learn ourselves, how is a regulatory sandbox usually, because the whole goal is that with this, we prove that it is possible, but also we show how policy could be shaped in so that things would perform better, that we get more renewables onto the grid, that we make use of all that storage, which is throughout the country.
I guess one of the main differences is also that, you know, in Europe or in Japan, the electricity market is a lot deregularized, and you have a lot of players. But in most countries like Bangladesh, it's very national. You know, it's basically the government that decides everything. So there's not these mechanisms in place that you would have in Europe. So it's yet to be defined, and hopefully Sebastian will help defining them.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I think Yuanga had a question. Yuanga, would you like to go forward?
Yes. So in the chat, I was wondering, in Bangladesh, so they installed over 6 million solar home systems, but I think the installation and maintenance cost must be quite challenging for the residents, especially in emerging countries. And how was it done? Was there any like government support, or how much was it?
So there is an organization called ITCOL, which is the acronym for Infrastructure Development Company Limited, which is a fully government-owned institution. And that organization acted kind of a platform where all the donors, whether this is JICA or the World Bank or the KfW, all of them gave the money into ITCOL as very long-term loans, let's say 10-year loans at a very low interest rate, maybe 3%. And then ITCOL would borrow that money, would lend that money onwards to so-called partner organization, which is like Brahmin Shakti and so forth, which is, for instance, our partner. And again, with very nice terms, let's say 5 years at 5%, and then they would again lend that money on to the final customers, who would then be able to buy a solar home systems under a microcredit, let's say under a 3-year loan at somewhere between 8 and 12% interest. And that would then calculate, if you say like a solar home system, 60 watt peak is $200, then over a 3-year loan, you pay $4 or $5 per month for that system for 3 years, and then it's yours. Now the trick was that these $4 or $5 was roughly what they anyway paid for kerosene. So throw away the kerosene lamp and take those $4 or $5 and give it to Brahmin Shakti, and they give you a solar system instead. And after 3 years, you have you become profitable. Now that sounds super simple, but it required one fundamental change of thinking, which is poor people need high quality products, not cheap, inexpensive products. Because in many other countries, the same model was deployed, but it didn't work. Why? Because they tried to use cheap products, because then you could make the microcredit loan smaller and it all looked better on paper. But then the product started failing after 1 year, let's say. But they still had to pay for another year, and then a huge conflict arose. In Bangladesh, a solar home system, the battery warranty is 5 years. There is no country on earth where you get 5-year warranty on a lead acid battery in a solar home system. It doesn't exist. It's only in Bangladesh. And the credit was 3 years. So it would make sure that what you promise them, that after 3 years, they actually make all the profit, that they actually have also the chance that they actually make it, because if the system fails before, they need to get a new battery. And obviously that all worked over time because 6 million systems means also 6 million batteries. So you had economies of scale, you had a lot of learning effects and so forth. But at the beginning, a very fundamental decision was being taken is that poor people don't need cheap products. Poor people need high quality products, but with good financing.
Thank you so much. And also, I am kind of interested developing microgrid in urban areas in developing country, because I think it's like the common problem, like the urban migration and industrial development and like high population density, but both the generation and transmission facilities are aging or insufficient to the population. And can microgrid be like one alternative solution to this? And Annette already mentioned the regulatory issue is maybe would be more problem in like the grid connected areas. And what other challenges or possibilities can you see?
So basically you're talking about on-grid microgrids in urban areas, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a whole different world, but also really interesting. And I think the regulatory challenges really depends on the country. So I think in Europe and in Japan, we're making progress little by little to allow this microgrid to happen, although very often they are more like virtual microgrids. So everything, once you're connected to the grid, anything depends more on, okay, you know, virtually, when you can create a marketplace, you can make it based on a marketplace, you can pay people for stabilizing the grid, for example, not necessarily for the energy. So you have a lot of different varieties and different business model now with on-grid microgrids, not necessarily, you know, controlling yourself the energy that you push through a meter or something, because very often that's not allowed. That's the grid operator's task. But you can, for example, decide how much energy you consume at a given moment in time, how much you put in your own battery behind the meter, and when do you discharge the battery behind the meter. So there's things you can do locally behind the meter, and that will look like a virtual microgrid in that sense. So it's a bit different from the types of microgrid that Sebastian is building, because they can actually control the power flow on it and make it work during a blackout, which is often something that you cannot do when you're on grid. You cannot island, which means like completely disconnect from the grid because of the safety issues that you might cause to the main grid. However, there's many other options, that will allow, you know, having more renewables and making this virtual microgrid, which are very promising. And I think that's the way that we'll go. We're going now in Europe and Japan in many ways.
Great, thank you very much. Would anyone like to share any kind of project they are involved in, which is similar to today's topic, before we end, or any kind of startup that is attending today, want to share their idea today?
Yeah, the AC microgrid. There are several projects going on, but they are still suffering to control their own way, because the TSO controlling everything, frequency and voltage. DSO need to control their own microgrid, but you know, it's a those conflicting the control. So then, because of the AC system, frequency is a big parameter, and also the tight connection of the power. That's that's the problem of managing their local microgrid. So I think we should separate the power connection between the microgrid and the main grid without using the frequency loop control. That's the next step we need to think about.
Thanks, Morita-san. Yeah, he's working on AC microgrid, so everything that is like technical control, I think Morita-san knows best about it. But yeah, maybe indeed the virtual part and the control part is becoming separate, and often the control part is maintained by the grid operators. That's what it seems like it's going towards.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much for asking that, for sharing your project. So before we end the call, anyone would like to have any final thing shared or anything, final thing asked? All right. Anything that speakers would like to share before we end today's session? Okay, great.
So thank you very much, Satak, for moderating. Thanks, ETM, for having us, and happy to be in touch with all of you from here onwards. I think I gave my contact in the presentation, but I'm sure ETM can also make the connect if necessary. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks for joining in, for listening. It was good to see, especially the people I know, like Vicky, Morita-san, Kawamoto-san. Yes, hello to everyone. And thanks for joining in. And yeah, for everyone else, likewise, I think you can find our contact details rather easily. So feel free to reach out anytime. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Sarta.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And if you have any questions or cannot find Sebastian or Annette, please just email or Facebook message or email Energy Tech Meetup as well, and we'll help you out. Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you, Annette and Sebastian as well.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I'm ending this. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank
Yuko.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.